What do you see when you look at these pictures? I see students, fathers, teachers, construction workers, and artists. Unfortunately, the reality is that many people see thugs, they see criminals, and sometimes they see animals. It is those images that cause this highly vulnerable group to be misunderstood, ignored, dismissed, demeaned, and victimized. According to the U.S. Department of Justice, young black men between the ages of 18 and 24 experience violence at disproportionately higher rates than any other group. Additional research shows they're more likely to be victimized repeatedly and by multiple forms of violence. The consequences of that violence can lead to disability, death, and a myriad of emotional, psychological, and physical outcomes that are negative yet avoidable. The assumption is often that if black men experience violence, it's their fault. They did something wrong. But the fact is, more often than not, their victimization is the consequence of just being black and being male. We can look at the news today and hear any story on a given day about a young black man who's experienced violence at the hands of the police in their community because they live in an environment where there's structural violence that impacts them every day, or perhaps by an individual who no longer feels pressure to keep their hate at bay because it's fueled by racism. In an NIJ study recently conducted by myself and my colleagues, Tim Johnson and Tim Farrar and our team, we asked young black men to define how they define violence. And we were told, I think each one of us sitting here is a victim. We each have a situation that we don't want to be in. It's hard, it's rough. Some of us haven't chose that life. Life chose us. When considering the types of violence that black men experience, we were told, we at a loss being born sometimes. There's no sympathy. You're always on the losing end. I feel like when it comes to either the police, women, or anything of that nature, black men are always at the bottom. The odds are against you, and violence is more than physical. It's mental, and it's verbal. So as members of SWR sitting here, we have committed ourselves to, quote, advancing, disseminating, and translating research that addresses issues of social work practice and policy and promotes a diverse, just, and equitable society. A just and equitable society, though, is what I would dare say that many young black men don't experience. They experience a life, according to some of our study participants, that is hard and rough, and during which violence occurs daily, is unavoidable, unstoppable, and simply madness. So let me be clear when I talk about violence by what I mean. Violence as described by our participants includes being hit by a car, hit by a television, raped by an uncle, molested by friends, molested by parents, being abused by parents, experiencing hate crimes, experiencing intimate partner violence, police brutality, gang violence. So I could go on, but I won't because I'm sure you get the picture, right? So who are these young black men? I'm sure you imagine that they live in urban areas, they're unemployed, they've had lots of contact with the justice system, criminal or juvenile. But that would be untrue. In our study, our participants live in urban, rural, and suburban environments. The majority were employed, and very few had contact with the justice system. But what they did have in common was a lifetime of experiencing repeated violence. What they also experienced was a welcome opportunity to talk about those experiences because usually no one cares. So one of the participants summed up their experience of being a victim as the following. Have you ever been to a circus? You know, you'll be watching the people on the tightrope. You know how you get that feeling in your stomach because you think you're going to fall? Just imagine that feeling never going away in every aspect of your life. To me, that's what being a victim is. That feeling that you can't exhale, you can't defend, you can't grow. Every time I see somebody angry, I don't ever jump to conclusions like, he's just angry because he wants to be tough. What I see is that he thinks about that gasp of air, and he's just trying to exhale. He's sick of holding. He's just trying to exhale, and he's going to get his exhale anyway. If he can't get it with the little dudes, he'll get it with the end dudes. He just needs to feel that breath. That's what being a victim is, that feeling. So I asked you when I began what you saw when you looked at those pictures, and I shared with you what they communicated to me, but I kept out two of my own interpretations. So first, I see young black men that are survivors. They survive the racism that permeates and envelops our society every day. They survive the messages that tell them that their lives are meaningless and that their loss of life has no consequence. I call them survivors every day. I call them survivors because every day that a young black man is living and breathing, he has beaten the odds. I also see young men who are dreamers. Their dreams are no different than ours. They want to live in a world that values them for who they really are. They want to live in a world that accepts them and live in a world who understands them. That sounds reasonable, right? I'm sure each one of us in this room can relate to that. So shouldn't those dreams become a reality? So what can each of you do? We're all sitting here. What can each of you do? Each one of us has our own passions. We have our own agenda that's often aligned with those passions. But you don't have to abandon that passion or that agenda to make a difference. You can be an ally. You can be an activist. You can challenge those who present falsehoods about young black men and the struggles that they experience every day. You can challenge those who ignore their successes. So when do you do this? In conversation, when listening to expectations, when listening to a presentation, or when you're part of a group that has excluded them, even though it is very clear that they should be included. Don't be closed-minded and defensive if someone challenges you about your level of awareness or accuracy about the lived experiences of young black men. Be willing to consider how you might be contributing to the problem. Be okay with not being the expert and having what you thought being upended or corrected. In your own work, you can make sure that your research does not ignore the realities of how young black men live in this world. You can make sure that as a social work educator, that your students know the truth. Commit to making sure that the assault on young black men is not buried, literally or figuratively. For those of you for whom this topic resonates and for whom you're already working in this area or you intend to start, we really do need you to help us. As social work researchers and educators, we are used to exploring areas that others don't care about. We're used to debunking myths and stereotypes, and this area is no different. You'll face those same challenges. You will speak with fellow researchers like I have who make you speechless from shock, not because you don't have the answer, when they say to you, quote, will you have them check their guns at the door? When you tell them of your plans to have a focus group with young black men who are victimized by violence. You'll struggle with how to respond, like I did, without anger, when fellow researchers ask your plan to separate those rival gang members that come to your focus groups. So let me guess what you're thinking. Did she say her study participants were in gangs and carried weapons? No. I used 3 magic words, young, black, and male. And what that meant to those researchers were gangbangers with guns. Researchers, that meant gangbangers and guns. So don't be deterred. Remember, you'll be experiencing just the tip of the iceberg compared to what young black men experience every day. Consider this definition of violence by a study participant. I believe that violence is a cycle of hatred. Basically, one person does something to somebody and they in turn do something, they've been victimized, they go on, they still give off the cycle of violence. It's causing harm to everybody. This young man's poster says, stop the violence, stop the madness, and peace in the hood. I challenge each of you to think about what you can do to stop the violence, stop the madness, and accomplish peace in the hood. Know that by taking on whatever role you choose, it is important. No role is too small, and when it comes to stopping the violence, the madness, and accomplishing peace, you will be helping those with erroneous views in our society to take a step back and reconsider how they interpret the images of young black men. These images, and images like them, should be what we want to permeate the hearts and minds of those who refuse to see what is right in front of them. Why? Because these images are the truth. Thank you.